Support for this show, Politics Done Right, comes from politicsdoneright.com, publishers of How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto Willis. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willis. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willis. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Today, I am extremely happy because we're going to touch a section of this country that is very misunderstood. We're going to touch a section of this country that many a times vote against their own interest, their own well-being. Look, Brian Reisinger grew up on a family farm in Sauk County, Wisconsin, and lives to tell the hidden stories of rural America. He is an award-winning writer, speaker, and consultant. Brian worked with his dad on the farm from the time he could walk. His book, Land Rich, Cash Poor, tells the story of the disappearing American farmer, weaving forgotten history with his own family, a four-generation fight for survival. Good. Welcome to Politics Done Right. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So before we get started, tell me a little bit about your history on the farm, where you grew up, etc. Because I want folks to understand that this isn't what we're going to talk about isn't something coming from the left coast or the right coast, but this is reality and something that we don't get a lot of in our mainstream media, how people really live, the tribulations that they're really going through.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you asking. I appreciate your focus on the issue. The reality is that I come from about as much a flyover country as you possibly could. You said it. I grew up working with my dad from the time I could walk, and it goes much deeper than that. We go back 4 generations. My great-grandfather actually fled and escaped pre-World War I Europe to come to Wisconsin, to come to the rolling hillsides of farmland in Wisconsin, try to make a better life. And my grandpa grew up in the Great Depression. And that was a time when farms, although things were incredibly hard, farms were such a dynamic part of our industry that he was able to climb into the middle class despite growing up in the Great Depression. My mom and dad survived the farm crisis. And then I grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s as farming went from being able to cut a middle class path through the depths of the Great Depression to barely making ends meet in modern America. I'm lucky. I grew up with a good, solid working middle class background, but it was slipping away for families and farms like ours all over the heartland. And so that's where I'm from. And that is kind of what informs my view on all this stuff as I dove into these issues for the book and as I think about these things now.
Now, tell me, as you see it, what ails the farmer?
Yeah, the thing that ails a farmer right now is an extreme kind of on steroids version of what so many people are experiencing in this economy. And that's one of the reasons I think it's so important. Farmers for generation after generation have been facing higher costs that have been going up, even as the prices they get for their goods may be going down or volatile. There's structural reasons that that's happening in our economy that really don't have anything to do with one side of the aisle or the other. In particular, these are deep-seated things that have been going on generation after generation. So now when we come into this time period, and we have people in this economy who are trying to figure out where their place is in this economy, we can learn a lot from the disappearing American farmer, the forces that are driving that disappearance, the things that are making it harder for farms to make ends meet. They're similar to the kinds of things that make it hard for a lot of people to make ends meet. but it's so deeply seated, so wound into what's going on in our country. I think it's really informative. The other thing about it is it does impact every single American dinner table. We're talking about the food supply for every American, and so the hollowing out of rural America is something that everybody in every part of America should care about because it's impacting food prices. It's impacting the security of our supply chain during crises like COVID. It impacts all kinds of things that really have a huge impact on every American family. And the thing is, it's happening back here in Midwestern flyover country where a lot of people don't necessarily realize what's going on.
It's interesting because in with everything that you say, I I study quite a bit of economics, and economics affect the farmer just as much as it affects the average worker, etc. And I look at the aggregators, let's say the ADMs and all the other food aggregators out there, and if I go ahead and I look at the stock market, I'll see that these guys have ever increasing profits. They're paying ever increasing dividends. They're doing very, very well. Now, in a closed system where you have the farmer who sells to a cooperative, who then sells to the ADMs, etc. If everybody in that chain, uh, they're working under our economic system to increase profits, to increase all these other things. Somebody gets squeezed. Somebody's profit is money not earned by others. And the way I see it, and you explain to me if I'm wrong here, you are the genesis of the food supply. And if you are the genesis of the food supply, it behooves me an economic system that says the one who produces isn't the one who profits most from that product or that service. Explain.
Yeah, the reality is there's a very big disconnect between what farmers get for their goods, their products, and their crops, and what consumers pay, whether it's in the grocery store or at the restaurant. And we could have an economy where we have a much more, I'll call it economically diverse range of options, different places that farmers sell to, different places that people buy their food from that's much more diverse than it is right now. We really don't. What we have is a very large global kind of commodity based supply chain that gets the food from the farm gate to the dinner table, but does it through some very specific and limited channels. Now, some of that has happened through natural competition and things like that in the direction of the industry, but some of that has also happened just because things in the American economy, not just in agriculture, not just in food, but all across the entire American economy have become dominated by big, right? Mm-hmm. And so farmers, the small and medium sized farmers, but even some of the larger farmers, they're the little guy in that economic picture. And so the squeezing occurs on the farmer. And the problem with that, beyond if you care about farmers, which I think a lot of your listeners probably do, we should care about people who are going through hardship. But irregardless of that, when farms get squeezed and we go from having over 6 million farms a century ago to having lost 4 million of those farms today, that impacts things. The farms that we have are carrying an increasingly perilous burden, and the channels that our food goes through to get to the consumers is one that can at times be incredibly vulnerable during disaster. It's one that is slowing down innovation and can lead to higher prices. It's one that creates all kinds of problems for the consumer, as well as, to your exact point, squeezing the American farmer and creating this disappearance, or at least contributing to it, because there's a lot of factors, but it is a big one. You're right.
We've lied to ourselves quite often. We've said we believe in competition. We've said we believe in having as many people in one domain as possible. Yet at the same time, we create laws. And we have to remember one thing. The economy is not divine. The economy was created by human beings. The laws that govern the economy is not divine. Again, these are created by human beings. And the fact that you spoke about channels, how the channels have been restricted in the way you get from the farm to market. That all those things are processes created by man, created by corporations, etc. The farmer, in my opinion, and you explained to me, you're the one who wrote the book, Land Rich, Cash Poor. The farmer has to find a way to take back control from the corporations. Again, we've seen all the profits in the corporations while the farmer gets squeezed. And at the same time, it seems like the farmers are selecting people who tend to believe in that process that squeezes them. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that what farmers have been facing is all of those things combined with the successive instances of economic upheaval, the Great Depression, the
Mm-hmm.
farm crisis, the 1980s, the impacts of globalization, some of which have been good, some of which have been bad, the recessions of the more recent years, all of that. When you combine that with what you're talking about, when you combine that with the societal forces of our economy shifting from rural to urban, when you combine that with the way that technology has changed and has begun to leave those small and medium sized and even some of the larger farmers behind in certain ways, which is something we can get into. You combine all of that, these compounding forces leave farmers in a nearly impossible situation. And the reality is that there is plenty of blame to go around, and that's the bad news. The good news is that means there's plenty of things that people on both sides of the aisle can do about it. One of the things that I think that folks on the right have failed to do is recognize what's happening in competition in this country, to your point, and that it's something that they believe in. I think many of them maybe in good faith, but it's something that has slipped away and policy-wise has not necessarily carried through in a way that can protect not only farmers, but small businesses, consumers of all kinds. There's things that I think the other side of the aisle has also done where the role of government has maybe been captured by folks who use it for things different than what it was intended for when we think about subsidies and things like that. And so that's why I think it's important to have honest conversations about both sides. But I think you're absolutely right. And I will say, I think that, people in the heartland, people in rural areas, they have a lot of reasons for voting the way they vote. One of the things that we do need to do is we need to see an entirely new reorientation by both political parties, and not just the parties, but all ends of the political spectrum around how are we going to create more opportunities for our farmers? Not just how are we going to support our farmers, because you do hear people on both sides of the aisle say, "Oh, I support the farmers," and they'll give lip service. They might even throw an initiative at a farmer now and then. There's certainly plenty of support in a general sense for farmers. They're a beloved people. They're wrapped up in our national identity. So I'm not going to say that nobody cares about the farmers, but I will say that I don't think our policy has been geared toward actually making a difference. And the question is not, what do you think of the farmers? Because everyone will say, "Oh, we love farmers. We love the Super Bowl commercials. We love those stories telling us about farmers overcoming adversity in the Great Depression. We love that stuff. It makes us feel good as Americans." But we've been stamping farmers out systematically. And so if we ask ourselves the question, what are we doing to create new opportunities for farmers, new market opportunities, new places that farmers can sell more goods, and in turn, consumers and hardworking American families, more places and ways they can get their food? That's what's going to help solve this. That's what's going to change a lot of these deep-seated policy problems.
I agree wholeheartedly. Now, let's talk a little bit about policy. You're a dairy farmer. You and your dad were dairy farmers. And just a question here. Your business was fairly profitable, but it's more difficult each year. It gets more difficult with all the different rules, et cetera. You spoke earlier about technology and how technology affects the small farmer. Specifically, how does technology affect the small farmer?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really great question. A note on how my background informs it. You're absolutely right. My dad was a dairy farmer. He's third generation. I worked with him, and then I also entered the journalism and the public policy world. So I end up, for better or for worse, getting a unique view of this, having lived it and then having worked in that realm. My sister still works with my dad, and we now have a farm that doesn't milk cows anymore, but raises cows for other farms, raises beef for consumers, and raises a wide variety of cash crops. The reason we did that is exactly what you just said, which is that it is becoming harder and harder each year for a dairy farmer of our size to be able to make it. So we have made a change. We're in that transition. Where does technology fit into that? This is one of the great untold chapters of what's happened to the disappearing American farmer. People remember the farm crisis in the 1980s, and that it was its own little depression just for rural communities. And what was going on around that same time was there had been a shift in technology in this country. In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there were people leaving rural areas for urban areas, and there was a need to figure out a way to make it so that farms could continue to operate with less labor because they had people leaving because there were better paying jobs in the city. So one of the ways you could do that is you could have technology help farms get better scale, meaning take on more acres, take on more animals with fewer people breaking their backs to do it. Some of that was good because we were losing workforce to the urban areas and because farming's hard work. And man, modernizing it and help it be more efficient is a good thing in general. I think we can all agree on some amount of that. But what happened is it went so far. And by the time we got to the 70s and 80s, those farm wages and those factory wages kind of caught up. We didn't need to have technology making it possible for farms to get bigger and bigger anymore. That had worked out and it was just fine. The technology was now leaving behind those medium and small size farms. What we needed was what's called scale neutral technology. That means that it's affordable enough and practical enough for farmers of all sizes. So instead of the big implements being pulled behind tractors that cover huge amounts of fields, bigger than a lot of farms have, and more expensive than a lot of farms can afford, we needed technology that was going to work for farms at all levels of that kind of chain. And we didn't have that. And by the time we got to the 70s and 80s, by the time we moved into the farm crisis, technology was leaving farms behind as well. So we got on the other side of that farm crisis. All that economic devastation came into the 90s. And the small and medium-sized farms that remained, not only had they weathered that terrible storm of the farm crisis, they also didn't have the technology they needed to be able to continue to compete in this economy.
Now, so the reality is we could have had policy that mitigated that. We could have had policies that gave certain advantages for small farms. Let me say something. We always talk about security. We always talk about the national security, and we tend to look at that from a militaristic point of view, not realizing that having a diverse bunch of folks who farm. Let me give an example. Suppose we created one large farm. It would always be more efficient to have one huge farm, one manager, and everything works fine. But you shoot that manager or that manager gets sick or something happened, you no longer have diversity. With the lack of diversity, you kill the crop. That's why we like to have diversity in crops, diversity in all these things to ensure the sustainability over time. Now, as it turns out, there is a downside. There's an upside to having huge farms. I mean, there's an upside to having huge farms. Theoretically, prices could fall because there's less labor, efficiency of scales, etc. The price you pay are two, right? One in which we can hurt ourselves if there is a major problem. We found that with the milk industry, right, with the Similac, when the baby food industry, by concentrating that into one area, when one plant went down, it was a national issue. Same thing with farming. We could have that problem. Now the issue is here that we lose our security by not having a whole bunch of small and medium-sized farms throughout our nation. And only policy can control that, because efficiency is not the only thing we should be searching for. We should be searching for sustainability as well. And one of the problems with this efficiency is that efficiency didn't go to pay farmers for having brought us to that point. It went into the pockets of the few who controlled capital.
And here's what's happening. We have had basically the holy grail of food and agriculture policy in this country has been about cheap food. Mm-hmm. And cheap food is, to your point, is a worthy goal. The reality is that food becoming a smaller share of household budgets is a good thing. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things about our system that have been a modern miracle in that regard. But when cheap food is the only thing you're going after, you lose having an economy that has a way that can be lasting and can be durable, to your point, being sustainable. And so we needed to have something a little bit different. We need to gear our government policy around what's going to create opportunities for those farmers, because if you create opportunity for those farmers to continue to thrive in a wide variety of businesses of all sizes, both the farms and in the general agriculture and food sectors to be able to thrive. You have more choices for people. You have more durability. You have all the things that you're talking about that we're lacking. And it's because our holy grail was only cheap food, which again is a good goal, but it's part of, it should just be part of it. It shouldn't be the only holy grail. So what we ended up having happen is, yes, the economy shifted more and more toward only efficiency, and efficiency is good and we need it. But shifting only toward efficiency means that we lost other things along the way. And that's a real problem. And it's a systemic issue. You talked about the Similac issue during COVID. We saw this. We had farmers desperately trying to find places to sell their food products and their prices going down. And we had consumers desperately looking for goods and their prices going up. How does that happen? Why can't the farmer and the consumer just walk across the street and help each other out? Because we have this large system that some of it is needed. We have to have a sophisticated supply chain to compete globally, to be able to supply different types of markets, but it doesn't have to come at the expense of also having local and regional economies that are robust. They give people options where you can go down the street to your grocery store, you can go to a specialty food store, you can stop off at a farmer's market, you can go to the local meat shop, you can do all the different things that you would do. You don't have to go 20 places to get your groceries. I'm not saying that, but you can have the ability to go a couple different places and to be able to have different access points for things. That's good for families. That's good for American competition and businesses of all kinds and all sizes. And that's good for the farms. But unfortunately, we have instead have this situation that has squeezed farms nearly out of existence and has created problems for everybody as a result.
We are wedded to one economic system, and we are wedded to one group of folks who decide what the economic system is going to look like. And I've always said this, even during every recession we've had, even through the depression, even through what we think is a growing economy, is that if you have a lot of people ready to do the work, you have a lot of products out there, and somehow you get unemployment and a shortage of product. The problem is not the people. The problem is not the lack of resources. The problem is a failed economic system. And I think until we're honest about that, we do, in fact, if farmers are suffering, if farmers are dwindling, if all these things are occurring, you cannot say you have a healthy economic system or economic system that works for people if people are suffering within that system. Let's say your dad, when you were growing up on the farm, let's say your dad got some sort of a very chronic illness that really stopped him from being able to run that farm. And to save his life, he had to have this $1 million surgery or whatever. Your entire farm would be on would be at risk. Yet, there are societies, and I always like to talk about our brothers and sisters in Norway or other places where all those things are mitigated. I had a guy who listens to my show in Norway, and he called and he said he's an American who moved to Norway because of those particular incidences. His son got paralyzed and over in Norway, and he was just amazed that a bad act or a illness or being hurt by your cotton gin or what, or a cow kicking you and making you sick or whatever didn't mean the end of the family farm or the end of your financial security. So I think I think having people like yourself out there writing books like this, telling people as it is. And look, I am a very political person, but if you notice, as I asked the question, I tried to make it non-political in the way, because it's a thing that affects people. It affects people's lives. And what we're looking for is the solutions that one must find to make sure all are sustainable. Now, let me just say, Brian, I ask questions, etc., but you wrote the book. What would you have liked to say or tell us that my questioning was lacking in?
We've had great questions, and it's been a really great discussion. I love being able to engage with people from all different viewpoints and all different places, because that's what we're going to need to be able to do to solve this issue. And so I appreciate the dialogue. One of the things that was really interesting and rewarding for me was being able to take a lot of these big macroeconomic forces and societal forces and technological forces that I researched to figure out what had been going on and connect that with my family's experience. That was very personally rewarding for me. I also think it's, I hope, one of the things that will make the book compelling to people, that will make people want to pick up Land Rich Cash Poor and be glad they did, which is to say they will learn about these issues we've been talking about, but they'll also see what it's like for our family. And so, I'd like to talk for a moment just about what that's been like. I mentioned my great grandfather coming over here, escaping pre-World War I Europe. He worked under debt for decades to be able to establish our farm. And my grandfather grew up through the Great Depression to be able to get into the middle class. Even in the modern day, I was amazed at how these big forces combined with things that happen in our life. My grandpa, when he was a man and my dad was 8 years old, my grandpa fell off a corn crib and broke his back. And my dad stepped up at the tender age of 8. And he's been milking cows and farming ever since that time to help out. When my dad was a parent and was going through kind of middle age, and I was 14 years old, my dad ended up having the need to have a really important surgery because of some internal bleeding things he was having. At 14, I stepped up. My dad was laid up for a month and a half. And you're right, these things, they put the farm at stake, and it really presses down on families like ours. And we're so grateful for the opportunity to do this and to live close to the land and to help feed the country. But also just the things that happen to a family when you're living close to land and you're subject to the weather, the wind, the rain, the economic forces, the physical danger and the peril that can happen. It's really a rewarding thing to be able to tell those stories about what happened when people were in danger, when people overcame adversity, when people worked in ways they never thought that they could. And when we face all that wind and rain, and to be able to connect that with what's going on in the broader economy and try to reveal something to people from urban and rural America, like, that's been a really rewarding thing to be able to do.
Let me tell you, Brian, teachers and farmers are the two biggest heroes, in my opinion, when we think about it. They feed us and they move us forward. They move knowledge forward. The two most important jobs in this country, in the world. Yet I believe too often they're some of the least respected. They're always given accolades. It's great to give a farmer and a teacher accolades. But when it is time to invest in doing what's necessary to make sure each of these are healthy, we find teachers scraping and we find farmers doing the same. I hope with the advent of your book, with some of what you've spoken here and going before, that people would start looking into real policies that make lives better for the farmer, the teacher, and all these people that are the heroes in our society. So with that, Brian Reisinger, author of Land Rich, Cash Poor, My Family's Hope and the Untold Story of the Disappearing American Farmer, who we don't want disappeared, folks. Let's make sure to go out and get this book. Let's make sure and support our farming community. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Well, thank you for having me. It's available on Amazon and other places online now. It's going to be in bookstores August 20th. I hope that people do pick it up and help join the fight to help save our farms. I appreciate you raising the awareness of these issues, and have a great show.
And folks, you're going to see all the direct links to the book right in the associated blog post for this particular program. And this will be aired on air as well. Thank you so kindly, Brian.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host here from Netroots Nation. Of course, we meet some very interesting people that are making a change to our politics. And today we are lucky to have Campt Tamarius of Smart Politics and David Campt of the Dala Company. How you doing, Miss Tamarius?
I'm great, thank you.
And how are you doing, Senor David?
Very, very nice. Very nice. I'm glad to be here.
Well, David, it's interesting because you and I spoke before, and you speak to a whole lot of people, and you wonder sometimes, I know that person, or now I remember what it's all about. Anyway, you are the founder of a company called the Dialogue Company. Why did you think you needed to do that?
Because I know that so many people can't talk well to people they want to collaborate with. So in the workplace, they can't talk well. They certainly can't talk well in the workplace about DEI issues. But here, it's a political season. People, especially white progressives, talk really poorly to people in their circle about racism and about other things. And so in order to do my part to change this country and this world, I wanted to manifest what I know about persuasion so that people can collaborate more, especially white progressives.
Now, you have a company called Smart Politics.
Yes.
How, first of all, you work a lot with David Kemp. Both of you work together.
I do.
First of all, what do you do at Smart Politics, and why did you find it advantageous to work with David?
Yeah, so Smart Politics was founded in 2017. It's a nonprofit organization. And what I do is I teach progressives how to communicate more persuasively with people who disagree with us. And a lot of times that means having conversations about racism and race. And so David and I have particularly collaborated around that issue.
Now, you just mentioned something that, let me kind of expand on it. You said, generally, if you're talking about issues between progressives and others, a lot of times the race issue comes up. Would you consider that the major issue, though, or would you consider that just one of the several issues that, you have to get gradations? What do you think?
It comes up a lot, but it is absolutely not the only issue that comes up.
Do you think it is the major issue, or do you? Because I want to hear your opinion before I say what I think.
I think it is the primary issue that progressives run into trouble talking about. Yeah, but it's not the only issue that they run into trouble with.
Okay, so since you work with David, I want to ask the question this way to David. Do you think the reason why many progressives may have issues with, let's say, and I don't want this to be a racial discussion, because this is much more, in my opinion, than race, what both of you are doing. But do you think it has something to do that just people are people? In other words, let me tell you, in my personal dealings with people, I don't find that conservatives are any less racist than progressives. The only difference I've seen, and y'all can correct me, both of you can, the only difference I think I've seen is that progressives intrinsically want to do something about it, even if they themselves have that cancer, they want to do something about it, while conservatives just throw their hands up, said to hell with it. That's life. Your thoughts?
My analysis is that conservatives, progressives might not be different in how much they're racist, but you're right that they're different in how much they care about racism. The way I think about it is that the two fundamental questions are, how much does bias and racism exist now? Conservatives tend to say very little. Progressives tend to say a lot. And what's how much does our historical racism affect us now? Conservatives say very little. Progressives say a lot. And they differ on those questions, but they have a tough time talking about that. And then, of course, the third question is, if there's any impact, should anybody do anything about it? And progressives say yes, conservatives say no. So I don't think the issue is who's more or less racist, but I think it's more about the worldview about racism that divides people and that they cannot talk about well. And because they can't talk about it well, it becomes one of many other issues that lights up the Thanksgiving dinner table, because people accuse each other of bad faith, accuse each other of being evil, and they use conversational practices that don't help enhance things. And that's what we work on.
And that is great. And let me just say something, Karen. I agree with just about everything that David just said. But it's so interesting to me from my point of view, the race aspect of all our problems is really so, and I want it to come out right. It is prevalent, but it should be minuscule.
I don't know that I'd say it should be minuscule, but it shouldn't be any bigger than our challenge in talking about other things.
I think I used the wrong word, because what I want to say is that it is kind of silly on our part that it plays such an important role when there are so many other things that affects us. Let's put it this way. You're a white woman, I'm a black guy. Let's say you just hate me because of the color of my skin, right? That doesn't go, except for power as far as being able to control my well-being. Other than that's a big thing, but in just the prejudice portion about it, it doesn't matter. But me trying to take away your right as a woman to do what you want with your body, something that has a lasting effect, it's a powerful thing. Yet, we would let that racial discussion overshadow that.
Potentially, but I think one of the things you have to keep in mind in all of these conversations is the role that trauma plays and the way that gets kind of repeated in our conversations. So yes, we may be in any given situation dealing with one power dynamic. The way it feels because of the history of trauma may be very different from the absolute objective analysis.
Right. She says that as she's a psychiatrist.
Right.
Like she calls herself political psychiatrist.
You know what?
She knows what she's talking about.
I was just about to get into trouble with her being a psychologist because my daughter is I have to say a doctor because she finished medical school, but she's not going to be practicing. But she teaches me quite a bit in analyzing these things, and we go back and forth as far as the psychology is concerned. And I guess I may have to develop more empathy for that thing that you just called trauma, and because I guess being a tough-headed SOB, I don't mean, but I'm serious, right? I have issues about trauma. Is trauma a crutch or whatever? So I think maybe I have to learn to accept that for some people's biology, trauma is an issue.
Yeah. I mean, no matter who you are as a human being, you're carrying some kind of emotional baggage with you, and it's going to show up in political conversations. Right. And we cannot be completely rational in these conversations, even if we want to. It's impossible.
Okay. I really have to learn that you can, so you're saying that you can't supersede trauma, or that you can't supersede trauma, or that you have to learn how to supersede trauma?
Well, we have to learn to work with our trauma and accept it, and accept that other people are going to always interact with us in ways that reflect their life experience, and they are not going to see the world necessarily the way we see the world, and yet we have to work together. So we have to learn how to talk with one another despite those differing experiences.
I guess that is why things like, I'm an engineer, things like science don't always work, because you have, it's not just A plus 1 plus 2 equals 3, or, it's not the Pythagorean theorem or something like that. You have to go, well, I think deep inside I get it. I guess sometimes in certain places I don't want to get it.
Yeah. It's challenging, and it is hard work.
Yeah.
And righteous indignation often feels better than the hard work.
I think that's a phrase, David, that I want to start using. Say it again. Say it. Righteous indignation
is more fun than hard work.
Oh, wow. I really like that. You need to put that on a bumper sticker.
How about outrage is a drug? Outrage.
Ooh, that's good.
That one. You say hers was short. I mean, hers was long, and you just came and gave the counter punch. Pow, pow.
Right. No, it is. I mean, that came from one of my workshops on the White Ally Toolkit. I've done a lot of work with helping progressive people who think racism is a problem. Again, talk to white folks, who talk to people in their family or circle who don't think racism is a problem. White folks are split 50-50 on that question.
Right.
Just not unlike white folks are split 50-50 on Mr. Trump, over 58%.
Right.
So that's why white folks have the common experience of I can't talk to my family members or my friends, etc., which people of color don't have that because of the different voting patterns and different issues. They don't have the problem of racism because black folks are 80-20 on racism is a problem. So part of what we have to do is to help people have these better conversations. And one of my workshop principles was like, when people say racist stuff, I just blast them because outrage is a drug, right? And it's a dysfunctional response, and it actually hardens opinions instead of softening them, which you could argue is the job of progressive white people, is to soften people in their circle, not to make them more entrenched around their view. But to do that, you got to come from a place of compassion, and people don't want to do that because outrage feels better.
Now, I have adapted a way of being over the last several years to preach and live civility, and also to try to have people develop trust in me and in me as a person that's not going to, even look. I'll be frank. I'm to the point where doing a show, somebody calls in, they call me all kind of N-words, and my response is, "Are you having a bad day?" Okay.
That's hilarious.
But it really comes from within now when I'm saying, "Are you having a bad day?" Because the words have absolutely no impact on me because I know who I am. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why I asked you about the trauma. I have the trauma of the pigment that I have living in America. Is it that I have superseded that trauma? Or what do you think that is? And maybe why I'm a bit less sympathetic with the race issue. So maybe you can explain that to me.
Well, as a person trained as a psychiatrist, I think of it through the lens of exposure therapy. Mm-hmm. So how do we treat PTSD in a patient? We do it with exposure therapy, where you subject yourself a little bit to environments in which you have to confront things that make you very uncomfortable, may trigger past trauma, may really be difficult for you, but your body naturally acclimates over time if you stay with it. And so eventually you get to a place where it just doesn't land anymore.
So that is like a vaccine.
A little bit.
You almost sounded like a vaccine. But
right.
Wow, that is amazing. I like that. So anyway, moving on. So David, what is your goal? What are the goal with you working together with Karen? What do you expect to accomplish in our body politic? Because the truth of the matter is, our body politic is in deep caca right now.
Yes.
So what is your, and this is pretty much how I'd like to end it. Where do you go from the policy, the type of methodologies you're using? And I'm going to ask the same question to Karen.
My goal is to be part of an effort, maybe catalyze it, where tens of thousands of people, especially in the swing states, but not only there, where tens of thousands of people, especially white folks, are talking to people in their circle about the election, but using better ways of talking, using compassion-based strategies. Because what we know is that these strategies, if I use compassion-based strategies with people I disagree with, I feel better about myself. I feel better about them. And overall, if I use those strategies, even if they don't, sometimes they change their mind, but sometimes they just decide that if they're voting the other way, they just decide not to vote, because part of their voting behavior is driven because of their hatred of liberals. And so if I create a positive encounter, they feel less resentment, and some of those people will vote differently or not vote. And so that's my goal.
I love that. Believe it or not, some of that I wrote in How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relative Friends and Neighbors. So I'm 100% with you with that. And sorry for stepping
right on, brother.
All right. Your thoughts?
It's very much aligned with David's thoughts. What I really want to see is people talking to their friends, family members, co-workers, neighbors, about what really matters to them in this election, and having conversations across lines of difference. Like, talk with the people who you tend to disagree with, rather than spending all your time, complaining with the people you already agree with. One thing I noticed that people really underestimate is how much of an impact they can actually have on other people's views. Once you earn someone's trust, once they believe that you're willing to listen to them and take them seriously, you can have a major impact on the way they vote. And so the place to start is with conversations around you rather than trying to influence things far away.
Right. There's a name for this. It's called relational deep canvassing. You'll hear about relational organizing from people like this conference who talk about, get people you know to vote. And you'll also hear about deep canvassing, where people send people out to have long conversations at the door to try to change people's minds. What we're talking about is combining those in something called relational deep canvassing, where you mobilize to talk to people already in your circle, but to use best practices in trying to get the ones who are left-leaning to vote who might not want to vote, and the people who in the center who might vote but might vote the other way to talk to them. That's the purpose of that.
Karen, thank you so kindly for enlightening us. That was excellent. And David, thank you so kindly once again for being on Politics Done Right. I mean, I think this has been an enlightening conversation. And I think I've learned, I think there's so much that we can go out there and do to make a better world. Thank you guys so kindly.
Thanks for having us.
We're here with Mr. Geevarghese. Did I say that right?
Joseph Geevarghese.
I got to read this. I'm so sorry. Joseph
Geevarghese.
Geevarghese. Okay, I get it. Listen, my name is Egberto Willis. I bet you can't say it.
Herberto?
Thank you. I don't feel bad. You mispronounced my name. I mispronounced your name. So we're both from...
We're even.
I'm from Panama.
Right on, bro.
Yo soy de Centroamérica. You know how that goes. Anyway, tell me about our revolution. What are we into right now?
So our revolution was founded by Bernie Sanders after his 2016 presidential bid. Our mission is to keep the progressive electoral base mobilized over the long term, and really to do three things, right? To elect down ballot progressives at every level of government, to fight for progressive issues like the ones that Bernie ran on, whether it's healthcare for all, whether it's climate justice. And the last part is to make sure we transform the Democratic Party so it's not a corporate-owned Democratic Party, but it's a party that represents the will of the people.
Well, let me just kind of forewarn you. I was a 2016 Bernie delegate. I campaigned for Bernie. I support Bernie. I am not only support Bernie, but I am also a paid member of Our Revolution, which means I subscribe to the Revolution. So, I mean, let me just tell you that we are on the same wavelength. Now, here's what's important, right? I love what you say about we have to decorporatize the Democratic Party. But the other thing that I love and why I think Bernie must be respected so well is Bernie has been pragmatic in his progressivism. In other words, he's caucusing very well with the Democratic Party, and in doing so, along with his flank. And you tell me, I think we've attained more progressive policies under Biden with the support of Bernie than any other president since Roosevelt. Please tell me more.
No, I think that's right. And look, at the end of the day, this is, we're playing an inside-outside game.
Right.
Right. On the outside, we have elected, dozens of progressive members of Congress. We have elected thousands of down-ballot progressives. All of that put together, right, shows that Bernie's not a lone voice in the wilderness. There's actually a movement, and that gives people like Bernie a real seat at the table when he's engaging with the administration, and that's what's helped us achieve as much as we have. That being said, have we gotten everything we want? No. But it's on us as a movement to keep fighting, to keep organizing, and to make sure the Pramila Jayapals and the Bernie Sanders have a movement behiend them when they engage the establishment Democratic
Let me
Party
ask you,
and
you just
elected
called from
officials.
Camila Jayapal,
Yeah.
and is Ro Khanna part of of that membership as well? The
Yes,
progressive
Ro
movement?
Khanna is a leader in the progressive
and
movement.
AOC, of course.
That's right.
And others. I mean, so what is the position of our revolution with Biden right now? Let me just say this. I hope we're promoting, no matter what happens in that resolution, that everybody needs to go out and vote, first of all, and everybody better start voting straight Democratic ticket this election forward. Your thoughts?
So, amen to all of that. I would say Donald Trump and the far right are an existential threat to democracy, and we have to do everything in our power to evict him from any office. And that being said, we surveyed our members. 34,000 people responded. Mm-hmm. These are progressive voters who are activists and donors like yourself.
Right.
And I would say they're the base of the Democratic Party. We surveyed our members, 34,000 people, 70% said that they're not sure that Biden can beat Trump.
Right.
So there's a real doubt in the minds of progressive voters about who is the best person. And it's uncertainty.
Right.
The second part of that is 70% think that Biden should step down. Those are related. At the end of the day, I think we start with the premise that you put forward. We have to get everyone to vote and defeat extremism in our country. And the question for us is, who's the best, the strongest, most energetic candidate that we can put forward to do that? And you know,
is our revolution taking any positions, or they're just sort of letting things play by?
Look, I mean, at the end of the day, Joe Biden and his inner circle will make a decision. Our members have spoken, as have AOC and Bernie. I think.
Let me interrupt. I think AOC came out in full support of Biden.
That's right. That's right.
Just want to make sure. Yeah.
No, that's right. I think, I think the administration, the campaign will take all of that into account as they make a decision about the best course forward.
Let me just say that on our chat we have, just wanted to say shout out to Joseph. I'm a big fan of his work for our revolution. Woo! And I used to attend the meetings regularly during the pandemic. I still attend some of our local Zoom meetings that we have with our revolutions. It's trying to keep it. As you know, these organizations have their lulls where they go through their lulls, and then the politics comes up and it's riot active again. What are you finding? Are you finding that the organization is growing? Are you in stasis, or where are we?
Look, at the end of the day, a lot of people just focus on what's happening at the federal level.
Right.
The truth is 1,000 flowers have bloomed since Bernie first ran in 2016.
Right.
There are, one of the panels that I co-hosted this weekend, at this gathering included Megan Green. She was a Bernie delegate in 2016, was so inspired, went back to her hometown, St. Louis, ran for the Board of Aldermen, then became president of the Board of Aldermen, then ran a slate. And we now have in St. Louis progressive control of city government. And they're passing things like union rights, expanding housing, universal basic income. So there's amazing stuff that's happening that may not be on the front page of the New York Times. But what I would say is I think the progressive movement is very vibrant and dynamic at the local grassroots level. And there's a lot of examples like St. Louis all across the country.
It's interesting because everybody talk about the progressive movement as if we have to really move people. I mean, if you detach ideology
if you detach names and all that sort of stuff from all that we believe in, and you ask every American citizen what they want,
Yes.
it turns out that what they want is what we are offering.
That's right.
And the thing about it is, what we, in my humble opinion, need to learn how to do is frame a message that doesn't allow the others, both the right and the neoliberals, from phrasing what we are not asking for, what we are demanding, as something we have not earned.
Yeah, that's
because we've earned. We are the ones who built this country. We are. I mean, the existence of billionaires are really things on our backs. So when we're telling them to pay more, we're not asking them to do a favor. We're asking them to return the loot.
Yeah, that's right.
You know?
I am completely with you. And look, at the end of the day, we the people, right, we want that which is basic. We want a decent place to live. We want food on the table. We want a good job. We want to make sure our kids have a better life than we have.
Right.
We're not asking for something that's outrageous. We're asking for basic fairness. And that's why we founded this country. We did not want power to be concentrated in a single individual, whether it was a king or a set of private companies, monopolies, right? That was the foundation of this country, was to let every person live out their freedom and autonomy so that they could live the life that they're called to live. And that's what our politics is about in the progressive movement. And I think if you remove all the name calling and the disparaging and you just lay that out, I think 99% of Americans agree with us. And the 1% that don't.
Look in the camera and give us a closer. Let us know where we go from here.
So, brothers and sisters, where we go from here is we keep fighting. We have made dramatic strides since 2016 in terms of advancing our agenda, whether it's healthcare for all, whether it's climate justice, whether it's union rights, raising wages. And we've got to keep hope alive because we've got to keep organizing to keep winning on the progress that we've made. So for all of the listeners out there, this moment might feel a little self-defeating. We may feel discouraged. But at the end of the day, where we've come in just less than a decade is remarkable.
Joseph, let me tell you, I have no despair. I have no fear. I think we're going to see a landslide that's going to surprise people. And, for all of those that think I am naive, I've been at this for decades. I think the Republicans have laid a pathway that has so inflamed women, so inflamed the poor, so inflamed so many, that if we do our job, and I'm talking about our revolution, I'm talking about the progressive movement, I'm talking about everybody, if they do their job, there is absolutely no way we don't clean house from municipalities to states to federal, but we've got to do our job.
Amen to that. And our job, whether as members of our revolutions or just citizens, is to organize.
Absolutely.
And is to have conversations with our neighbors and our friends and our families and organize people to get out and vote and to be active in the public arena. And that's how we win. And that's how we've won all through our country.
Joseph. Okay, let's have a talk. Remember, you couldn't say my name well either. Joseph Geevarghese.
That's getting closer, brother. Geevarghese.
Joseph Geevarghese.
Yeah, that's right.
I got it right. Thank
you so much
kindly.
for having me, brother.
Actually, my brother, thank you for being here.
Support for this show, Politics Done Right, comes from politicsdoneright.com, publishers of How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto Willis.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willis. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative,